whatever decision you make will be the right one. You've got this.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
In this latest episode of Island Influencers, I delve into Sarah Mercer, co-founder of Earthscope's remarkable story. Originally from Liverpool, Sarah moved to the Isle of Man at age 2, shaping her childhood along the island's shores and landscapes. Her academic pursuits in physical geography at Durham University sparked a deep interest in environmental issues, leading her to co-found Footprint, an annual environmental summit. Returning to the Isle of Man, Sarah immersed herself in projects like Island Utopias, a lockdown documentary capturing community spirit and Manannan's charms, an app blending folklore with nature, all whilst living off-grid and making the film entirely by solar panel. She collaborated with the Isle of Play to engage children with nature. She explored sustainable practices across Europe with AimHi Earth, presenting alongside notable figures and partnering with impactful organisations globally. Sarah's dedication culminated in co-founding Earthscope, driving carbon literacy initiatives and advocating for sustainable practices. I hope you find Sarah's story as fascinating as I did. She describes herself as an advocate, nature lover, filmmaker, and sustainability facilitator. Her journey is one of passion, purpose, and a relentless dedication to creating a more sustainable and harmonious world for all. Here is episode 110 with Island influencer Sarah Mercer, co-founder of Earthscope. Welcome to Sarah Mercer to the Island Influencers studio, albeit on Zoom, because I know you've had a bit of an aborted journey here with your e-bike.
Yes. Sometimes e-bikes are not the way, but had a lovely brief cycle ride and then a slightly panicked cycle ride to get back to you.
No, well, it's great. So at least we got the benefit of technology these days that we can record this interview as it is. So we were just saying about I recorded a few Zoom Island Influencers episodes earlier, and the Wi-Fi wasn't as good as we have today. So it's good. Shout out to Manx Telecom, I guess, for all the fibre network that's working everywhere. So that's great. So Sarah, for the benefit of our listeners, would you be so kind to tell us all about your background? I know you've sent me some background in advance of our meeting today, and it sounds fascinating, all the things that you've been up to. So,
gosh, well, how much detail do you want me to go into, I suppose? I guess, where did I come from? I was born in Liverpool, very proud Liverpudlian, and then moved here when I was 2 years old. So some people may call me Manx or not. My mum's a Kelly, but I call myself Manx because my heart very much is here, and I have loved growing up in the Isle of Man. What a place to be a child, to be free. You know, I've grown up on Gansey Point, and the beach was my garden, which is just absolutely fantastic. So building rock towers and digging holes was my whole childhood, which was brilliant.
And I think wonderful.
Yeah, that very much instilled that sense of the being outside and being connected to nature is just a very normal part of life. I didn't really think of it as particularly exceptional. And I think talking to lots of people on the Isle of Man, that is actually quite a common feeling, because it's just there for so many of us on the Isle of Man, where it's not so accessible for those who've grown up elsewhere.
No, for sure. And living right on the point, as you say, that is, that's quite a front garden that you had.
It certainly is.
So what happened from there? Where did you go? Where did you go to school?
I went to school at Castle Rushen High School, as many listeners may have done. Had a wonderful time there. Brilliant school when I was there, and may well still be, I'm not sure. Had a really good time with some incredible teachers. I spoke to you about one in particular, Mrs. Howell Evans, who was just the best geography teacher of all time, and absolutely inspired that sense of wonder and awe about geography in particular as I was in school. And just, I think I really suited the sort of academic school aspect, I was very good at ticking the boxes and writing the answers I was expected to, which meant that when I got to university, I was less good, because you have to do a lot of creative thinking and you have to think outside the box when I got to university. So it's quite a big leap for me as quite a sort of linear person, going from school, which suited my style of learning quite well, to university, where I was completely out of my depth for a lot of it, but also supported by some incredible tutors and lecturers when I was there.
So what did you study when you went to Durham University? You went to, didn't you?
I did, yes. Well, geography, obviously. Thank you, Mrs. Howell-Evans. I went to do geography at Durham University. Was known for having quite a good physical geography in particular degree, which I was very interested in. I didn't really care about the human geography stuff at that point, which is quite ironic considering what I do now. But I really, really liked the detail that you could go into in physical geography. And throughout my time there, I had a passion for Antarctica in particular. And I was desperate that one day my research would take me to Antarctica. So when you had the choice, when you were choosing your modules, whenever you were choosing a subject, whenever we had freedom to choose, I would always choose something Antarctica related, or ice related, or something like that.
Really? Give me an example.
Oh my gosh! So we had gonna have to go back to the names of the modules now. We had one called Antarctic Environments, which was just fantastic. It was a really big, broad overview of Antarctica, but then through that you got to see some of the sort of, particularly the difference between West Antarctica and East Antarctica. I don't know if you know anything about it, but
Not really. No, I don't. No.
It's just very exciting. So West Antarctica mostly is ocean. There's not so much land in West Antarctica. It's an oh my gosh, can't say that word. Archipelago. There we go. Of islands which the ice sits on, but actually lots of it is sitting on the ocean itself, albeit with some islands underneath, whereas East Antarctica is almost entirely land-based. Right. So you have a very different system. So I studied East Antarctica, but there were lots of other things. So we got to go to Iceland, was one of our trips, because of, we did, I don't know what the name of the module was, but it was basically ice, all things to do with ice. So we got to go and do some real field work on a glacier. And I probably shouldn't say this, but while we were there, we were doing our field work on a glacier. So the first few days we all went round as a large group, and then we did our proper field work. So we were in groups of 4, and we chose one where we could be on a glacier, studying some of the flows through. And we were independent. Our lecturers sort of floated about, but it was mostly just us 4. And halfway through the 3rd day of that, we got a call from one of our lecturers, and they said, what your other lecturer has just been found with a broken hip and we think has fallen off a cliff. He's fine, but he's just been found with a broken hip. You'll have to get off the glacier. And we were like, oh my God, but also we haven't finished our research yet. And we saw the air ambulance go over as we slowly made our way off the glacier. So that was quite dramatic, which meant we had to drive our way back across Iceland in a rickety old Land Rover. It was fantastic. Not so much for my lecturer, poor thing, who didn't have a great time. But he was that kind of guy, he probably had a great time.
Wonderful. So what happened next?
In Iceland, I think he had to stay because he wasn't able to be moved, and all of the students plus our poor one lecturer left had to get us all back to England. But it went surprisingly smoothly, considering.
Yeah, hopefully it didn't affect the marks too much at the end of the year.
No, I think they were fine. I can't remember exactly, but I think they were okay.
Very good. So what else did you do at Durham? You've had a few things that you could have done. Thanks for sending your bio before. You've co-founded Footprint.
Yes.
You could tell us all about that.
So this came about during my dissertation, which again, surprise, surprise, was about Antarctica. I was studying the terminal velocity of glaciers. Sounds really fascinating, doesn't it? You get to draw pretty lines on pictures, of satellite pictures. And I was studying changes of millimeters. I'm not kidding. They are such small changes and incredibly detailed, sort of fine work. And I got to the end of my dissertation. I had a really good time doing it. And I just sort of had this moment of, it kind of doesn't matter just how many millimeters the glaciers are moving. Actually, what matters is the fact that they are moving and that not enough people know about it and that not enough people are doing anything about it. So I had this real moment of my skill set and my abilities actually don't suit this really, really, really hardcore physical geography science work, and are much more about getting excited about all of that in front of people. And so I had this massive shift to talking to people about glaciers is where it started. So the year before Footprint, me and my friend Mariama set up a event called Changes in the Arctic. So that was specifically Arctic, and I was just talking about ice. And then Footprint came during my master's when I was a research master's, so I had, in theory, plenty of time on my hands, and put together Footprint, it was about bringing positivity to the conversation. I think as a climate scientist, so much of the conversation is doomsday sort of discourse. Like, everyone's talking about how awful it is, how terrible it is, how bad it's going to be, all of this. And that's important because that is the truth of where we're going. But if that's not coupled with potential solutions, with hope, with opportunity, that's just paralyzing for the vast majority of people, including the scientists. So Footprint was all about acknowledging where we're at and saying, okay, it's really bad, but here's where we have agency. Here's where things are going in the right direction. Here's where things can be better. And it brought together this really broad range of speakers. We kind of we didn't want it to just be talks. We wanted it to be an interactive, workshop-oriented art with science, with research, with students, with people from the town, and it was bringing all of these people together in a really hopeful 2 days, and it was fantastic. We had such a good time doing it, putting it together, but also getting to be there and getting to hear all of these incredible people talk about what they're doing, and then getting our hands grubby and getting involved in it.
It sounds like a real pivotal moment for you in your career.
Absolutely. That one event has led to pretty much everything from now. So my job with AimHi Earth, which is something I do now, that came from one of the speakers at Footprint recommending me to the CEO of AimHi Earth. And so you can link back really well.
Who were the speakers at it? You've noted here Penn Haddow and Sir David King. Was it one of those?
No, it wasn't actually one of those. Sir David King did offer me a job when he came, which was bizarre. And I didn't take him up on that because it was, again, going sort of back into that really hardcore science. But it was a gentleman named Dr. Aaron Thierry, who is a fantastic speaker about community, how to communicate, how to bring community on board, how to sort of generate collective action in a way that is positive for everyone. He's absolutely incredible. If you haven't heard of him, please go and check him out.
Yeah.
He's one of the...
We can put a link to him in the show notes if you would send us over. Yeah. So you got an award for that?
Yes, yeah. The amazing Maggie, who works at the Durham County Council, was instrumental in helping me to put the event on and finding locations and things, was kind enough to nominate me for the Caring for Your Environment Award, which was fantastic.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. So after your degree and your master's, and did you do a PhD as well?
I did not do a PhD. I was just a master's.
Well done. That's a really big achievement. So you came back to the Isle of Man after that? Yeah.
I did. It was, in one way I wanted to be back. I've been away for 4 years at that point. But also, I think everyone comes out of uni and has that weird moment of transition. It's like, oh, okay, I've been a student for the past 4 years. Now what do I do? Who am I? Who have I become? How have I changed? So all of that, it was this sort of transition period. And then, yes, Culture Vannin put out the advert for becoming their UNESCO Biosphere graduate intern. And I was like, well, I'm both a graduate and very keen on the environment. I'll see what happens. And I applied.
Antarctica, though.
I know. Well, no, Antarctica has distanced in my dream at this point, sadly. It's still there in my heart. One day I shall get to go there in a productive manner. But yeah, so they put this advert out, and I was very fortunate to get it. And what a team to work with at Culture Manannan. Just incredible people. Opened my eyes to a world of the Isle of Man that I'd never really dipped my toes into. Again, because my parents aren't from the island, they both grew up in Liverpool. I haven't had that Manxness to grow up with. I've had elements of it. You know, I know ginnies as ginnies, and I know, you know, there's the various colloquial things that you don't even think about.
Yes, nettles to English listeners.
Yes. But I didn't have it embedded. And getting to work with Culture Manannan, I brought in the climate and environment side, and they were so open and so welcoming and so giving of their knowledge about the culture and the Manx culture side of things that I had this whole new side to me opened up, and I am so excited about it now. And I'm always trying to link the nature threads with the folk tale threads and weaving them together.
Not something I ever really kind of thought about, but I mean, back then, in the age of tradition, of course, we would have been so much more connected to nature back then. It's so relying on it for everything, not just nipping to, I don't know, Tesco's or the Co-op or other supermarkets are available to get whatever. It's
you're required to interact in order to get what you like. There's a quote from Paul Rowsland, that's not his name, but it's close to that, who is he calls himself a river guardian. He lives, I think, on the River Thames, and the sort of synthesized quote is, "Immersion in nature makes love inevitable." And I think that's so true when it comes to that when you're almost forced to interact in a positive way, to get your food, to get your experience, to walk to work, to walk to wherever the bus is, then love of it becomes quite an inevitable thing. And I think that applies, so going back to what I was saying, so much on the Isle of Man, that in order to get to work, the vast majority of us have to see a tree or see the ocean or some form of connection with nature. And we all love it.
Yeah. And doing part of that, you did a bit living off grid.
Yes.
Well, tell us a bit about that.
Well, very fortunate. It was from March until 6 months after that, if not a bit longer, actually. Yes, when it was warm. And it was a fortunate timing in some ways, unfortunate timings in others. So it was midway through my work at Culture Manannan, and then COVID hit. And all of my work with Culture Manannan had been in person, interviewing people, getting people to write postcards and all of this. And suddenly all of that had gone. And I only had a year with Culture Manannan, so this is halfway through the year. My existing projects are useless. So we moved off-grid into a van to be isolated from my parents, who we didn't want to didn't want to interact with, not from we don't like them, but from a keeping things safe perspective. Yeah. So we had the van and we thought, oh, well, we'll see how that goes. But it was entirely unfinished. I'd been converting it for about 2 years, so it had no countertops. It didn't have a fridge. It didn't have a toilet. It didn't have a shower. It was a very much part finished conversion, which we then had to make elements of while we were living in it in order to make it functional. But it was the most fantastic experience. I know it was an awful time for a lot of people, and I do not envy those stuck in flats where they couldn't go outside for 6 months straight or however long it was. But do you remember that it was the drought period at that same time as the first lockdown?
Yes, everyone remembers the great weather we had on the first lockdown.
Yeah, beautiful. So if you had access to outdoor space, of which we had a field, it was fantastic. So we built a desk outside. We did basically all of our work outside. I interviewed people on Zoom, much like you are now, and recorded them that way, with the amazing sounds of the tweeting birds in the background. For me, it was so just what an experience of. And then every time we got sort of done with work, we would dig a bit of turf and plant a potato. Just what a combination of activities.
Yeah. Sounds amazing. Yes.
It was. And we were all solar panelled, so all of the editing, all of the technology that went into the film that I made with Culture Manannan was all solar powered through that whole experience.
Good job you did it from March to October, though, because obviously having solar panels myself, it's not so reliable through the other 6 months of the year.
No. No, it's not. It's I have tried. I tried, and I think I made it to about midway through November when the solar panels just gave up completely and said, nope, the sun isn't high enough in the sky.
That's it, no more.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So what happened after that, Sarah?
So worked with Culture Vannon, had an amazing time. Thank you again to Culture Vannon for the open arms that you welcomed me with. Created Island Utopias, which is the film, and Manannan's Charms, which was that app weaving together nature and folk tales together. And then sort of leaping off the back of that, while finishing up editing the film, I started work for Isle of Play, who many people will know are the incredible children's charity doing fantastic work about getting people, kids in particular, out into nature, out exploring, and just able to be more themselves. I think it was great
more
to
children,
get to see
away from
more
a screen.
children. Yeah. And it was fantastic because, you know, they are kids that could be at home on their, I'm going to sound really old now, their PlayStations, their Xboxes, their computers.
Yeah.
Those things.
Phones, mostly, I think.
Phones, yeah, I suppose. And they chose to come, and they chose to come to the adventure playground and cook food on the fire and build dens. And it was just a fantastic experience, getting to experience and like interact with kids in a space that they felt was entirely their own.
And what sort of age group, Sarah?
Incredibly varied. So I think, I mean, speak to the Isle of Play team now for a better, accurate description. But I mean, we did primary school kids through to, I don't know maybe 14, 15 were sort of more the age that people were getting to come into the adventure playground. But they were there at the same time. You had like a 6-year-old next to a 14-year-old, both playing. How incredible is that?
Yeah. And who doesn't want to build fires when you're young?
Exactly. And then, you had like the older kids teaching the younger ones how to use a flint and steel and how to make fire. And these are kids who in school hate it and do not interact with people. And it's just wonderful. A fantastic experience to get to see kids in a kid environment.
That's super. So that you did a bit of traveling after that, I think. You went across Europe, looking at more sustainable living and working practices. What did you do then?
Yeah, I had a really varied experience when I went traveling. I went with the intention of trying to see lots of sort of alternative ways of experience, of doing life, of living, of having a house, of getting food or whatever that might be.
Was this sort of your delayed gap year?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've been trying to do this since COVID happened. And finally, I both converted the van completely, and then COVID wasn't happening. So I could actually go
somewhere else.
Yeah. And, you know, time to see alternatives. And it was fantastic. So I spent some time building a eco timber framed house in Switzerland, just near Zurich, which was really, really interesting from trying to the practicalities of building an eco house in a society where buying eco materials is not so easy. And so that was quite a challenge, but really interesting. I went to...
In what way? I don't understand. You mean rather than building it out of the wood from the trees that grow in the forest by some other method?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to build it, I guess, entirely yourself, you'd literally be going and chopping down trees. But as soon as you start interacting with B&Q is not the right example, but like an actual shop, there's there's treatments that go into so many of the things, and you use materials that are not degradable back into the earth because you have to. So there's a balance to be held. It was quite interesting going in from an outside perspective and trying to understand what of these aspects do I enjoy personally, and what of these aspects wouldn't I take if I was to do something similar myself.
Right. Okay, that's something that anybody who builds an eco house, I don't know if they consider that or not. Really, it's I mean, I live in a Swiss chalet, Scandinavian
that sounds
designed
incredible.
chalet myself, but we've made it more eco-friendly as time's gone on. But it started with triple glazing, and it had its own sauna. But it was incredibly warm with all the walls inside are insulated. It's an incredibly warm house.
Wow.
Solar panels now, of course. But in terms of, was it put together with preservatives on the woods? Absolutely. And have we used them since? Well, of course, because your house wouldn't still be around, would it?
Yeah. And there are some that, necessary to preserve the wood. If you just put raw wood up, you have a house for a year. But it is an interesting question to figure out what exactly you want to take and what you would like to leave behind.
Sure. So what else during your travels did you do?
Went to this is very interesting. So I went to what was supposed to be sort of an eco retreat, where they were setting up an eco retreat. So we weren't doing the retreat, we were setting it up for others to do the eco retreat. So lots of, again, moving things around, building various items. But it was on the Isle of Pag in Croatia, which we rented a moped and toured just to see what the island was like. It's very small, much smaller than the Isle of Man. And it was quite an odd experience. It was a very, very barren country. It was very desert-like island with very sort of brushy vegetation everywhere. And I didn't know enough about the nature in the area to know whether this was sort of natural habitat and whether actually there's a thriving biodiversity here, or whether this is a made or a lost habitat, whether this is that the habitat has been taken down in similar ways that many islands sort of lose all of their trees because they're the most convenient building materials. And it was, I think as a place to put an eco retreat, I was fascinated, because I personally would never choose to go to a place like that for an eco retreat. I want to be surrounded by noise and vibrancy of plants and animals, and I want it to be a thriving area of biodiversity. And it felt, for me, just incredibly barren and dead, the whole island. The only place that even felt somewhat alive was a sort of a monoculture crop of olive trees, and they were amazing. They were like many, many, many hundreds of years old, but they were a monoculture of trees. And I didn't enjoy the location. While the place that we were building together was fantastic, the location itself was really isolating from nature for me.
Right. Yes, that would be. And yet think about places on the earth. There's plenty of barren places, aren't there? Vast swathes of land that, doesn't fit my definition of living in nature either, I must admit.
No. And I think maybe I didn't do Croatia right. Maybe I should have gone more inland as well, because I think a lot of the coast is that quite barren environment. Next time I'll go see the mountains.
So you've come across all sorts of notable figures through your travels. How did you meet Chris Packham?
So Chris Packham was a guest speaker on a session that I ran as part with AimHi Earth, which is that charity I was speaking about before. And they did a live stream of their environmental course from the Eden Project, which in itself was an incredible experience. So this was the start of my traveling, was I got to go and live basically in the Eden Project for a month. What a great experience. And it was all behind the scenes. So we got to go in the giant back doors, and we got to see all of the sort of bits that the general public don't tend to get to see, which is fantastic. Be there after hours. I don't know, it always feels slightly special when you're anywhere after hours.
I'd love to go. I still haven't made it down there.
Oh my goodness. Do make it, because it is, I mean, you'll see a tenth of it in the day that you're there. It requires long amounts of hours to get to see it all. But what a story as well, in terms of the building of it in the first place, and the history of the area. Yeah, amazing experience. And Chris Packham was one of the guest speakers there, which was great. So got to ask questions, and he sort of was the expert in that session, which was great.
So how long were you with AimHi Earth?
I started, again, this is right place, right time, really. I started with them 3 years ago, maybe. Sure, we'll go 3 years. And before that point, they were a general tuition charity where they just wanted to get kids knowledgeable about stuff in a really exciting way. So they had a bunch of really amazing teachers. And I actually applied as a project manager, and they said, we'd really like you for the project manager role, but would you consider applying as a teacher? I went, absolutely not. I'm not a teacher. And they said, no, come, do the interview. We'd just to try it out. And I went, okay, but I'm telling you now, not a teacher. So I did the interview. They gave me the job as a teacher. And I was like, oh my God, okay, well, I don't know whether I can do this. I'd physically, like, imposter syndrome massive at this point, because all of the other teachers are like award-winning teachers. They're teachers who are head teachers of 6 schools. They're just...
You won one. You won an award.
For
Caring
teaching?
for your environment. Oh, it doesn't matter.
No,
Caring for your environment.
teaching.
It's about the right thing, though, isn't it?
It's about caring, yeah.
Knowing your subject.
Yes. So, yeah, I knew my subject, but knowing a subject and being a teacher is a very different thing. And so I had massive imposter syndrome. They asked me to put together a lesson. I put together a lesson, and I cried about it for about 3 days. And I emailed. But
We've all
it's
been
true.
there.
I know. And I emailed the lady who was my line direct person and said, look, I am not cut out for this job. Putting me alongside these other people, I can't do it. These are incredible teachers. I am not on this level. And she said, well, funny you should mention that, actually, because we're actually shutting down the tuition side of what AimHi Earth does, because it was just AimHi at that point. And we're just focusing on the Earth side, which is their course that they have put together, and which is what I could deliver without having to craft a lesson.
Handpicked, making things up about yourself that you couldn't do it. You were handpicked.
Sure, some people might say. I think I was very much right place, right time, and happened to be fortunate enough that they were swapping over to what I could do just as I could do it. So yeah, fell right on my feet in terms of that, because I got right in the ground floor of AimHi as it became AimHi Earth, which meant that they were doing all those incredibly exciting things, and I got invited to be a part of that.
So where did you get to work for them with? You've listed a few here that's, astonishing. You should be very proud of yourself, like BAFTA, Albert, Unilever, the NHS, Eden Project, Universal Studios.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Well, these are all, they're all companies who are putting together their sustainability plans or have sustainability plans, trying to get their employees on board. And what AimHi Earth does is that they are very, very good at getting employee engagement. That's kind of their niche.
Teaching the employees at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we would run a session for something like Unilever or Universal Studios, and they would open it out to their employees, and as many people as them would come on board as possible. And we'd get them really, really hyped, really excited to get engaged with the sustainability plans that their business have put in place.
Tell me it wasn't on Zoom. You had to go out.
It's all on Zoom.
Oh, did you? You didn't? Well, I suppose it would be, yeah.
Yes, sadly didn't get to go out to Universal Studios, but probably good for my carbon footprint.
You took part of COP26, the COP26 summit in Glasgow.
Yes. So again, that was through AimHi Earth, and they ran, that was a collaboration with AimHi Earth and the Great Big Live Lesson, I think is the name of that, which is an organisation that puts on really, really big worldwide lessons for people of school age. So they worked with AimHi Earth to put on their course for tens of thousands of students around the world, which we presented live from the Blue Zone of COP, which was what an experience. Which meant I was privileged enough to go up to experience COP26, and I kind of got a bit of the outside inside knowledge. So my co-presenter was doing a lot of the Blue Zone stuff, and I did the other bits, which was fantastic. So Fridays for Future March, I mentioned. Yeah,
and you met Greta Thunberg, but you guarded her.
Yeah, this was accidental location, finding myself on my feet. There was the Fridays for Future March, which is a student march, and as I was there, I thought, well, I'll go. Not a student anymore, but I'll show support. And it was an amazing march because they brought all the unions on board, and they brought a fantastic collection of really varied groups on board. Greta and her team had done a really good job of making it quite an open march. And I was there very early in the morning and sort of was meandering around the park that everyone was collecting. And someone said, has anyone got any gloves? And I was like, yeah, obviously, always have my gloves with me. I'm a cold person. And I sort of waved my hand and said, yes, I've got gloves. And they said, come with me, dragged me along. And then there was sort of a circle of people holding a rope. And they were giving this brief about, like, if anyone gets close to you, make sure that you keep the circle, make sure that you don't let anyone allow under the rope. If anyone has this ticket, they're allowed under the rope. And I was like, what is happening? What is going on? What have I signed myself up for? And then they didn't say anything about who was going to be involved in this weird
Inside
circle. Yeah. We start the march, and we have a group of people from... They have a proper name, and I cannot remember it. They are like highly vulnerable nations, or it's not just nations, it's groups as well. So lots of people from indigenous nations were part of this group, and it was part of Greta sort of building the voices up around her. That's not just her, actually. We should be listening to these people. So a fantastic group of them who were dancing and singing and telling their stories as they were going along, which was fantastic. And then all of a sudden, during this march of 100,000 people, I saw just this little flash of yellow. And it was Greta in her yellow raincoat, who had snuck in at some point in this march from wherever she was. And we were protecting her and the group as part of this march. So that was a very cool moment as an environmentalist.
Yeah, I'm sure. So Sarah, you've obviously had a varied exposure here, and built by your obvious enthusiasm and knowledge in your subject. So I'm excited to hear about the next chapter and how you've got to Earthscope. So maybe you could just help us find that journey.
Absolutely. So I sort of collated this it has been almost a snowball effect, I suppose. So from my parents both being very keen to get me outside, whether I wanted to or not at the time, to my grandma who lived in Devon and showed me the footprints of otters in the soil, which was what an incredible experience to get to see those tiny, tiny little footprints. And otters are still my favourite animal to this day. Mildly traumatising me by showing me the varying dead bats and other creatures that she kept in just random drawers in her house. That was an interesting side to her love of nature, is that she preserved everything she found. But she also had like a little bat radio, and she would get me to listen to the sounds of the bats. You know, there was two sides to my experience in Devon, was vast amounts of dead bats, but also getting to listen to them and getting to see the footprints of otters. I think in retrospect, definitely instilled a love overall rather than a hatred for nature. And then Mrs. Howell Evans, who I spoke about, all of those influences in my life in like sort of catalyzed that love of nature. And then my work through my undergrad and my master's in footprint and Culture Manannan and Isle of Play, all of these things really then embedded that and broadened my view of climate to being much more about nature and people and the connections and the stories that we have between us. But then also on the other side of things, in that, you know, we can feel quite isolated from climate change on the Isle of Man. You know, we feel nice and lucky to be in a moderately temperate place with very few impacts, it feels, from climate change. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure, but it can feel quite isolating. But I have watched, you know, my window looks straight out onto the sea. I have watched with increasing concern as the storms that we see are getting worse and worse, to the extent where they are hitting the third floor window of my house. I travelled with my friend to Canada to do her dissertation research, and we went to the tar sands in Alberta. Firstly, a very interesting experience of how the people who run the tar sands talk about the tar sands and get the communities on board with that. They hide the tar sands very effectively, and they make it seem like still a very beautiful nature perspective from when you're driving on the road. But we went just after, I don't know if you remember, they had huge wildfires. So this must have been 2017.
No, I don't.
Massive wildfires. And
Right.
We came just after, so just as they were petering out. And her research involved interviewing people about the tar sands and about Alberta and about the area. And almost every single one of them talked about the fact that their house had burned down, that their shop had burned down, that their car had been burned out, that in some way they'd been affected by these wildfires.
Sure.
That
That's
they
terrible.
Yeah. And they were working for the tar sands, which then obviously are contributing massively in their excessive emissions to climate change, which are then contributing back to the wild. So there's this sort of cyclical
destruction
pattern going. Destruction going on. And driving past swathes of dead forest, burned forest. And I know that,
I've seen them in California and Colorado, same sort of thing,
Yeah. And, I know that actually forest fires are a natural part of the system and they are necessary in a lot of ways, but it's the impact and the worsening impact that they are having that was just so terrifying to see so close. And sort of those, when we were in Montenegro, so just after being in the Isle of Parg, we were in Montenegro and driving through, we suddenly sort of looked in our rearview mirror and saw a wildfire sort of starting. And about 20 minutes later, the whole cliff, the whole hillside was wildfire, and it was getting closer and closer towards the town.
Moves fast, doesn't it? Oof.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I don't know, I think those combined with the initial love of nature, with the terror of watching it be destroyed, it really sort of cemented, this is absolutely what I'm doing with my life. This is absolutely my purpose, my role here, my existence is for this, to protect and to preserve and to not just nature, but people are part of nature. And that's very important to me, that people don't get forgotten in this sort of aim to protect. People are a key part of that. And so sort of then having all of those experiences, working with AimHi Earth, seeing the hope that AimHi Earth brings to people and some of the solutions, as anyone involved in environmentalism or in climate change knows, you go through a period of mourning. You go through a period of, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever. I cannot face this. This is too big. This is too huge. Me as one person can't do anything about it. And I absolutely had that. And I still sort of flip-flop into it. But seeing the hope and seeing the passion of people in AimHi Earth, in the organisations that we're working with, in the marches, all of that hope and passion inspired something in me. And I was like, oh, okay, there is hope here. There is possibility. There is opportunity. There's not just possibility, there's opportunity. And all of that then combined with my love of the Isle of Man, cemented by Culture Vannin, I knew I had to come home to where my roots are and bring all of these, not only skills, but knowledge and connections and all of that, bring it back to the Isle of Man and do in the place that I love so deeply, the thing that I love so deeply. So again, all of those nodes just coming together, and right place, right time.
So you formed a company called Earthscope.im
Yes.
with your business partner?
Yes, absolutely. Matthew Warren. And it's a social enterprise. So 50% of its profits goes straight back into the community in anything environmental, climate or nature related. And its ambition is to do exactly that, to bring hope, to bring possibility, to highlight opportunity, to enable action, to enable possibility to happen.
So you've put together the world's first carbon literate parliament, I understand.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
This is a very recent accreditation that the government has just achieved. So since January, we have been training various members of Tynwald. And I don't know if you know anything about carbon literacy, but it's the Carbon Literate Project was set up in Manchester University, with the aim of getting people carbon literate. So what that means is just knowledgeable about climate change, essentially. And as part of that, they've trained over 80,000 people. I think they've been in something like 120 countries. They've been recognised by the UN as one of the top 100 most influential projects that are going on at the moment. We, with the amazing help of the Net Zero Isle of Man team, they've been instrumental in bringing it. We are then delivering it. Brought it to the Isle of Man, to the Isle of Man government in particular, and got members of Tynwald through. And when you get 50% members of Tynwald through, you can apply to become carbon literate as an organisation. So the world's first. I know, it's exciting.
That is exciting.
It's very
congratulations,
exciting.
and congratulations to them for being foresighted enough to engage your company to do so.
And for doing it. And it's not easy, and it's hard stuff that you're learning about. And they were everyone we've been through so far and trained has been so engaged and really, really happy and pleased that everyone has been so on board with it.
And so this is an ongoing project. This is yeah. Okay. Wow. So you got your work cut out for you.
Certainly do.
As anyone will tell you, there are a lot of civil servants.
There certainly are. Yes, we're about 200 in, and we will be aiming for 500, I think, by the end of the year.
Right. Okay, that's a good start.
Certainly is.
Excellent. Well, if that's okay, I mean that's wonderful, and obviously we'll put the links to Earthscope in the show notes. But if you don't mind me asking, I do ask this of every guest I get on the podcast. So, I mean, I'm a financial planner. That's my day job. What's your earliest memory of money?
Gosh, it must be to do with, this is my earliest memory of money, is mum probably paying me 50p to empty the dishwasher. And I think we had that system going for about a week when I realised that emptying the dishwasher wasn't worth 50p. I'm so sorry, Mum. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I know. It has to be way more than that. Yeah, I realised that with my son. Just have to appeal to a greater sense of good.
Apparently, yeah. It needs to be intrinsic rather than extrinsic, apparently, for me to do anything.
Well, if they put it on eco, will that make any difference?
There we go.
There you see.
We go.
What's in it for me? Well, I'll put it on eco if you empty it. Don't cost you any 50p's then, Mum. Okay.
I like it. I like that. Yeah, I'll suggest it as a tactic next time.
And what about how was money growing up for you? Did you get pocket money? Did you save it? Did you spend it all? Have you brought those habits forward that you've learned from your parents to today? How you manage your money?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, probably better to talk to my parents about how they spend money, but they've always instilled an idea of being sensible with your money. Only buying what you can afford is how that they've approached life. So they're sort of very against the idea of going into debt to buy something. So I've always been encouraged to save up first, then buy the thing, and that's always been true. But also sort of that idea of making sure that you really want it. And I think they instilled a massive appreciation of the things that I then bought. So it's not that I bought something, used it for a week and then ignored that thing. I would think about it for 6 months, save up, and I'd think about it every day for those 6 months. Then I'd buy it, and then I'd appreciate that thing forever. I still have my, what is it called? A DS Lite, my Nintendo DS Lite that I bought, I think 50% with my own money. Mum and Dad said that they'd contribute 50%. And I looked after that so much, and I still have it. And I still it's one of my fondest items, just because I put so much work into getting it that I now appreciate it hugely. And I think that has very much come through to now. But then I also think I have maybe not as much knowledge about being clever with money. I think I have a very simplistic view of money. I think, save up, buy the thing, have the thing. I don't have an understanding of much more about money than sort of goes with that.
Well, that's important when you're running a company.
Exactly. It's been a big learning curve. Let's say that.
It's very easy to spend it, not so easy to make it. Yeah. So, what does if I was to ask you, define what meaning rich or wealthy is to you, what would you say?
Oh gosh, maybe as a financial advisor, you're not going to like my answer.
I don't know. That's prejudging an outcome.
That's true. I apologize. Being rich or wealthy is people. I think the thing that makes you rich and wealthy is having people who love you, who you love, who are there for you, who you care for deeply. Like, I mean that really deep love where you could not talk to them for 6 years, and when you talk to them again, it's like you never didn't speak. Double negatives there.
I know what you mean. You pick up where you left off, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's very much for me what being rich and wealthy is. But I think maybe also a sense of contentment's the wrong word, but comfort. Like you're not worried about finances. You have enough that you are comfortable with that you can be comfortable, that you're not worrying about where your next meal comes from, that you're not worrying about whether you can pay rent. I think that level of financial security is so important to feeling rich and wealthy.
It's a great answer. Thanks. And you've done an incredible amount of things all right throughout your life so far. What's given you the most fulfillment?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, yeah, all of the above. But if I had to put one on top, I would say Island Utopias, which is the film that I made with Culture Bannon, because not just in terms of the outcome, which I'm incredibly proud of and I massively appreciate, but also the process of doing it. I got to speak to people about their experiences during COVID and about their vision for the Isle of Man. It was a really hopeful conversation that I was having with people. It's a beautiful experience, very much a slow-paced artistic experience, but you come out the other side a changed person. For me, not saying everyone who watches it will, but for me, it's almost a meditation on potential, a meditation on potential. That's what I call it. So I would say that's on the top.
Wow. Okay, so for any existing or aspiring business owners, entrepreneurs, what would be your number one tip? What have you learned yourself that's been the most important in setting up your own company?
Ask for help. Gosh, it's so hard to set up a company. There's so many things that if you've come from not that background, you don't know what any of these words mean, the how to do this, when to do that. But people do, and people are so keen to help each other on the Isle of Man, particularly. It's for me, I don't know if you found this, but it's not a very competitive, people aren't trying to push the other one down. We're all trying to lift each other up. And maybe that's the benefit of being a social enterprise rather than a business. But
yes, undoubtedly. I mean, it can be. I mean, there's a lot of competition around in many sectors, of course. But, I think as you live and learn, you discover that actually if your competitor is successful, then that means the Isle of Man is more successful and means we're all more successful. So if we can all be as generous in spirit of that, then it would be a good place.
Absolutely. I mean, we sort of take the approach of collaboration, not competition. And that is so true, that anyone who's working in the sphere that we work in, we're like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. How can we work with you? How can we help you? What can we do? How can we point people in your direction? And vice versa. And that's just a much more friendly experience overall.
Yes, definitely. So if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a bit of advice, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. What would I say to 18-year-old Sarah? What am I doing at 18?
School?
Yeah, going into uni. Maybe take uni slightly more seriously if we're going legitimate advice. I loved what I did, but I spent a lot of time not doing my academic work because there were just so many other things to be doing. I think I would have really thrived. I would have thrived even more if I'd really gotten into the academia earlier, because I did in my third year and I loved it. It was the best year because I was so invested in what I was doing. But also, you've got this, whatever you decide to do, 18-year-old me, you will learn from it and you will make the best of it. Whatever decision you make will be the right one. You've got this.
Right. That's a super bit of advice. Thanks. And what do you do to relax? I'm seeing a rack of guitars behind you.
Sadly not me. I am not a guitarist, which is upsetting to me. I'm no musician. I love music, but I can't do it. Which is, I occasionally yodel, as everyone does in the shower. But what I do to relax, I mean, I live by the sea. It's the inevitable answer now, but I say I'm an OG sea swimmer. I have always swum in the sea, and I've been slowly getting more into being under the sea. So I've been starting to learn how to free dive, and I did scuba trials a couple of months ago. So that's my, just anything to do with water. That's
and
my
all
relaxation.
in the Isle of Man in a dry suit.
Water wherever. I'll do it wherever. Yeah, it gets a bit cold, I will say, in winter. I definitely get my wetsuit on, and it's a briefer experience. But anywhere there's water, you'll find me in it.
Wonderful. And favourite trip you've ever taken? Not the tar sands, I'm thinking.
No, although it was very interesting. I don't know if you've ever been to a tar sands museum, but I'd weirdly recommend.
There is one?
There is, yes. Alberta, I can't remember what it's called. Alberta Tar Sands Museum. Yeah, fascinating. Favourite trip? I mean, it's got to be the travelling around Europe with the complete freedom of being in your own van. And
I take it you got a loo plumbed in by then.
Yes, did get a loo at that point, which was convenient. Nice little composting loo. And a shower, full working shower, recirculating shower.
Wonderful. A composting toilet. Well, of course it would be. I want one for my garden.
Oh, yeah.
You'll have to send links for that.
Sure. It's a very good one and very affordable in comparison to the vast majority that I've seen.
Yes. Okay. And I think I might know the answer to this one. Best things about living in the Isle of Man?
Yeah, obviously the sea. Any part of water. I mean, no, the best part about the Isle of Man is that it's all there. You know, you can be in the sea and 10 minutes later be on the top of a mountain and 10 minutes later be in a pub next to a waterfall. You know, I love the size of the island it means that you can do so much in one day.
Yeah, but you don't spend the whole time traveling to get there. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Spending time in Canada, we spent 2 hours walking to get to the nearest shop because it's just not designed for walking. So I love that about the Isle of Man. But then the people, obviously, my whole thing is about talking to people. I get so excited about the people of the Isle of Man. It's the community, it's all just fantastic. And I love how friendly, you know, you can go off and chat to anyone and most people give you the time of day and then what their dog had for dinner. It's brilliant. I love it.
All right. So I'll challenge you with a challenge. Okay. What's the challenges that the Isle of Man has? I'd say
this in as both a challenge and not a challenge. Agility in terms of ability to move quickly. I think it has the possibility of moving quickly, but I think it tends not to. So that's quite an interesting, it has the capacity, but we aren't using it to its best potential yet.
Do you put that down to what, inertia or lack of funding or what?
Gosh, I mean, we could be here for a whole new podcast for that. I'd say that the Isle of Man is already pretty great. And I think the will to change it is maybe not there as much as it might be in a place that is not so great. And that's something to listen to. You know, if you're coming in and you're like, oh, we should change everything. No. There's a lot of amazing stuff in the Isle of Man, and we should absolutely be protecting that and enhancing that. And that's, I don't know if I can't remember his name, so I'll have to share it later, but it was a talk by a gentleman, I'm going to say Simon, who spoke about, this was about NGOs going into less developed countries or more vulnerable countries, and how they would often go in, solve a problem. That problem would be fixed for a bit, and then they would leave. And that problem, it would get worse than it was than when they originally went, because the small amount of resilience that the community had figured out before they went in had then been lost in the time that the NGO was propping them up. And he studied what effective NGOs did, or what effective interventions is the wrong word, but what is effective help, essentially. And he said, ignore what's wrong. Don't ignore it. Acknowledge it. But actually lift what is already good, and then the community will lift the other elements themselves. And that is so true, I feel, when that's what we sort of keep in mind as we go about doing the work that we do, is what is already great about the Isle of Man. How can we make that even better? Because people will help themselves. They don't need someone to come in, tell them what's wrong, give them a sticking plaster and then disappear. No. People want to be told that I don't know. We don't, I wouldn't want someone to tell me my life was wrong and that I had to do something. If someone lifted me up though and said, oh my gosh, you're such a great swimmer, Sarah.
Yeah, let me make you better.
Yeah, like, okay, yeah, cool, thanks so much. And then I'd get a little bit fitter, I'd get a little bit healthier, I'd probably eat a little bit better because I want to be better at swimming. All of those other things would naturally come. And I think that's the approach that I feel the Isle of Man, how can we lift the Isle of Man in the ways that it is strong, and it will lift the rest of it up itself.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, what's planned next?
Big plans. I mean, the vision and the mission for me and for Earthscope is to reach every single person on the Isle of Man, and to create, or to sort of transform the Isle of Man into one of the first nature first nations. So what I mean by that is where every decision made by every person at every level is made with nature at its heart. And that's, again, not nature that is separate from humans. That includes humans. Nature and humans are one. So that's the big vision. That's the big mission. And however we want to go about doing that, there are many paths that we can take. But then also lots of our work through government and through some of those other aspects as well. But that's the big vision.
Yes, it sounds like a great opportunity that you've got going forward, and I wish you every success in it. It sounds just so inspiring.
Thank you so much. We're excited about it, and we hope other people are too.
No, indeed. Right, so just moving on to the final few questions, just a few fun ones, really. So, books that you've read, podcasts you've listened to, anything that you'd recommend to our listeners as another source of inspiration and self-development, or philosophy, or comfort, or anything. What would you?
Yes, 2 books in particular. I'm not a podcast listener a lot of the time, apart from I'm a completionist. So I will start a podcast and then I will listen all the way till the end of that podcast. But so not great at recommending a variety of podcasts, but books I can do.
Well, it's a good job that everybody agrees with you, because we're getting on for 18,000 unique downloads for Island Influences now.
That is fantastic.
Which is amazing. Yeah. So
that is fantastic.
Tell all your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll start at the start and I will listen to every single one. But at some point you've got to stop making them, because I need to be able to complete. But maybe that's in many, many years' time. So let me know. Yeah,
well, there's so many amazing people in the Isle of Man. It's it is an amazing place, and the possibilities of many other island influences is it's astonishing, really. There's just so many.
But books, sorry, yes, going back to books. 2 books I would strongly recommend. Number 1, The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. I don't even know how to describe it. It's a set sometime in the near-ish future. I think it's purposefully vague, and is a potential route for how the world could go in terms of climate change, climate action.
Right. We'll put that
global effort.
We'll put that on the show. Well, we'll put them both in the show notes. What's the other one?
Yeah. Just as a pre-warning for that one, the start is hard to hear. Just as a pre-warning, make it through the first 3 chapters, you'll be okay. But the first 3 chapters are very hard to hear. They're about the realities of climate change. So just a quick pre-warning on that one. The other one is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and it weaves together a braid of scientific knowledge about the world, about plants in particular, but nature, plant wisdom, so the wisdom coming from what we can learn from the plants themselves if we observe, and indigenous wisdom about the natural world. So she comes from a indigenous community in the north of America, northeast of America, and she weaves together these stories in such a fantastic and deeply impactful way. And I think, a lot of people who are involved in environmentalism or think about it in any capacity genuinely wonder how humans can live in balance with nature, because it seems like everywhere we go, we destroy it. We've got like Midas touch, but the opposite way. And I think Robin is the first person who has ever made me see a way forward for humans actually working as a benefit to nature, not just with nature, but as a benefit.
Yeah, I watched, was it Netflix? The biggest little farm.
Yes.
Did you see that in California?
I haven't, but
They did.
my mum has
Oh my
recommended it.
goodness, it's amazing. Yes, I'd be interested to know what you think.
Okay.
Please drop me a line when you've watched it.
I will.
Amazing.
That's I've been meaning to watch it for years, but I will get on that.
Favorite quote? You've given us a couple of excellent ones already.
I would say, going back to the Paul Rousland one, immersion in nature makes love inevitable.
Lovely. Where can people go to learn all about you? Well, we'll put all of that detail in the show notes. So earthscope.im.
Absolutely.
What socials are you on?
All pretty much earthscope.im or earthscope.iom, depending on where you are. But if you type in Earthscope Isle of Man, I'm sure it will come up.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's wonderful. We'll put all those for our listeners in the show notes. But thank you so much. What a fascinating conversation. And I'm much more confident about the future listening to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your great questions as well.
Thanks for listening this far. I hope you found this episode to be valuable. If so, I'd like to ask you for a small favour. Would you please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review, because that's one of the best ways for others to find the series, and please send a link to the podcast to 3 friends or colleagues who know they'll find it helpful. That way, we can spread the word about how great a place the Isle of Man is to live and work, and help spread some positivity. Thanks again for tuning in and being part of our great community. I'll see you next time. Island Influencers is a fortnightly podcast. Make sure you don't miss the next episode by clicking the follow button on your podcast platform. A big thanks to the producer Catherine Watts from Social Cues and editor Martin Bamford at Bear Content, and thank you for listening.